Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. Thanks so much for taking time today to be here with me. We are talking all about self-leadership this month on the Grace and Grit podcast, and I, for one, could not be more excited because, as I said last week, self-leadership, I really feel, is the bedrock of the work that I do as a health coach. I really help women to become more self-directed in the health journey. And this topic is certainly timely because we have also opened the doors to the Grace and Grit Signature Program, which is basically a program that I open twice a year for people to work privately with me for 6 months. And in the program, I really do a deep dive in how to be self-directed along the journey to improved health. And I do that by way of course, educating my clients about physiology and about ways to optimize their physiology. I give them tools and strategies to help them make the journey easier. I give them a very clear pathway. And I help them to troubleshoot because, of course, problems are going to come up, challenges are going to arise. And I give them a different perspective on what health is and how to acquire it. And when I say a different perspective, I mean different than what's available out there in terms of mainstream fitness and health information. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I feel that I teach my clients how to not need me, or really how not to need anyone in the long run to help them take better care of themselves, because they become so proficient in the practices that allow them to live in a state of stellar health that they don't feel that they need to constantly hire outside help. So if you're ready, if you are someone listening who feels ready to really live in a space of no longer judging your body and to start treating it like something you really deeply care about, if you are ready to really wake up most mornings with loads of energy, excited about the day ahead, if you are someone who is ready to stop breaking promises with yourself that you'll do better, and you're someone who's really committed to doing better, if you're ready to line up your actions with what it is you say that you really want for your life, you really should consider joining me in this program. So again, it's the Grace and Grit Signature Program. And as a prerequisite of this program, I require before anyone can register for the program, they must sign up for a free 1-hour coaching call with me. And I do that to obviously make sure that we're a good fit to work together and that I can truly help you. So if you're interested in the program, you can read about it on the programs page on the Grace and Grit website. And if you feel that it is something that might be a right next step for you, I would encourage you to book a coaching call with me, a free 1-hour coaching call with me by going to graceandgrit.com/kickstart. Again, that's graceandgrit.com/kickstart. And if you're curious to sort of hear directly from some clients of mine about the experience of working with me, hang tight because at the end of today's episode, I am bringing on a client of mine who's worked with me for several months. And I will be continuing to bring on many of my clients over the next several episodes so you can hear directly from them what the experience is like. Now, last week, we started on this topic of self-leadership. We started with the first pillar of self-leadership, which I believe is self-respect, right? If you don't think you're worth taking care of or worth showing up for, self-leadership is really not going to be a possibility for you. And so that's why I always put self-respect as the first pillar of self-leadership. But once you truly feel that you are worthy of getting to know and you are worthy of spending some time developing, then it's time to start leaning into the next couple of pillars, which are self-awareness and self-development. So self-awareness is getting to know yourself better. And when you know yourself better, you are presented with the opportunity to start making different choices about how you move through the world, or not. And I say or not because some people become more self-aware and they choose not to change their behavior. That is a choice. But self-awareness presents you with the opportunity to take radical responsibility for shaping your life. I'm also a big believer that self-awareness is our responsibility as human beings. If you lack self-respect, which again is that first pillar, and I also think of self-respect as kind of self-interest. If you lack self-respect, if you lack self-interest, you will likely have zero interest in becoming more self-aware. I think not being self-aware is one way that many people choose not to take responsibility for their lives. So they make their schedule really busy, so busy that they never have to slow down and really look at the choices that they've made. People often become workaholics, right? Throwing themselves into their work so they don't have to develop or address other challenges in other areas of their life. And I come across a lot of people, specifically women, who have kind of made it a habit to focus on everyone else to the point of completely dismissing themselves. And while with some people that may be unintentional, I think subconsciously it is intentional for many people because it's our way of avoiding taking responsibility for our own shit. Like when we are really busy, when we are all consumed by other people's drama, other people's crises, other people's lives, we get to avoid looking at the misalignment that is happening in our own lives. So this is why I believe self-awareness is really a big piece of self-leadership. So what is self-awareness? Well, Wikipedia defines it as conscious knowledge of one's character, feelings, motives, and desires. So self-awareness is basically getting to know yourself. Why is it important? It's important because when you have a better understanding of who you are, what your character is, how you feel about things, what motivates you, what your desires are, you can more easily direct yourself towards becoming the type of person you want to become. When you become self-aware, you are empowered to make changes and to fortify the things that you're strong at and to develop the areas where you're weaker. And, why is this important to the health conversation? I would argue that most diets will sell you on the idea of following a protocol that worked for someone else's life. And what's crazy about this model is that I see so many women beating themselves up that a certain diet didn't work for them. Well, of course it didn't work for you because it wasn't necessarily designed for you. Just because it worked for someone else does not mean it's going to work for you. You have different likes and dislikes. You have different challenges, different obstacles. You have different biochemistry. So to assume that we can just purchase these cookie cutter plans that are going to be the cure-all to our health woes is a little bit crazy. And I have said this many times, and I will say it here again. I really think that when we are constantly following protocols and instructions that worked for someone else's life, it actually doesn't bring us closer to ourselves. It takes us further away from ourselves. And again, I am not anti-education by any means. I think it's really important to understand how biology works, how the body works, how the body responds to food choices, how the body responds to exercise and restoration. I talk about all of those things immensely on this podcast. But there comes a point where we have to stop looking outside of ourselves for all of the answers. Because good Lord, you could spend the rest of your life just consuming content about health. And that's what a lot of women are doing. They're just in a state of constant consumption. And because they're never really trying anything on with any kind of consistency, and they're not really asking how that thing is working for them as an individual, they really aren't getting to know themselves better. And that is hugely problematic. Because at the end of the day, I think that's what health really is. It's discovering what makes us feel energized and optimized, and really what makes us feel depleted and exhausted. Relationships are not cookie cutter models. If you want to improve the relationship that you have with food, with exercise, with your body image, you have to be willing to spend some time with yourself, getting to know yourself. And how do you get to know anybody? You listen. You ask questions. You honor what the other person is saying. And I think that is very similar to how we start to build a better relationship with ourselves. We ask questions. We stay curious. We try some things on. We make some mistakes. We make some corrections. And ultimately, that's what gets us into higher ground, into a deeper relationship with ourselves. Another way in which I think that kind of diets and protocols kind of lead us away from ourselves is that a lot of them are promising big results in timelines, right? 30 days, 60 days, 12 weeks, you're going to have whatever, the body of your dreams, rock hard abs, all of your health woes will disappear, whatever the claim is. But if you think of health as a relationship, which that is how I look at it, I look at health as a relationship with all of the things I mentioned, food, exercise, body image, recovery with yourself. Relationships do not thrive on timelines. So if you were looking for the love of your life, right? If you told yourself, 30 days, and I am going to have the love of my life. That sounds absurd, right? And it is absurd. So why would we expect health to be that way? Self-awareness takes time. You have to invest time and energy to get to know a person. And that, my friends, is how you fall in love with yourself. You get wildly curious and fascinated about who you are, what makes you tick, why you do what you do. And I love this. This is not, I did not come up with this. I read this somewhere and I think it's such a beautiful thing. Curiosity and judgment cannot coexist. So the self-awareness I am talking about is not about judging yourself. It's not about getting to know yourself and judging all of your inadequacies. It's about staying curious. Curiosity and judgment cannot coexist. So be curious about who you are and why you do what you do. And therein, of course, lies the problem, right? I mean, curiosity, again, it takes time and energy. And I think some of the biggest obstacles many women are facing in terms of self-awareness along their health journey is they're too busy. They're too busy. Schedules are too full. The to-do list is too long. They have no time. So they are living in a state of constantly reacting to life. And self-awareness requires that you slow the hell down, to notice, to inquire, to be curious. Who's got time for that this day and age, right? I also think we struggle with self-awareness because we're too distracted. There are so many diets and exercise programs and gurus and teachers telling us, that this is the best idea, this is the best exercise, this is a superfood you need to incorporate into your diet. So we're very distracted. Not just by ideas, not just by information, but of course by technology, right? Technology has made us we have very short attention spans. So we love bouncing from thing to thing to thing to thing. And you can't get to know anything if you're not willing to spend time with it. I think we also struggle with self-awareness because we love to be judgmental, especially of ourselves. And again, if you started a new relationship with anyone, be it a friend, a lover, and you started that relationship by being judgmental, I don't think that would get you very far. And if it did, I would really question the health of that relationship. And I also think that we struggle with self-awareness purely because we lack awareness practices in our life. Self-awareness is a practice. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So as kids, I think we had a little bit more awareness of the world around us. I mean, you watch kids get mesmerized by the littlest things, like a little worm on the sidewalk, or, like a piece of dirt that's stuck to their shoe. I mean, they are curious creatures, and they are so aware of the world around them. And I feel like it is that awareness, like that sense of awe, that we need to redevelop for ourselves. Really be fascinated by who we are and what drives us. Now, the way that I teach awareness in my work, when I taught the consistency code, I talked a lot about this. I think there's a lot of layers to awareness. But some ideas to kind of get you start considering developing some self-awareness along your health journey are, number one, I would encourage you to question why it is you even want to improve your health. Start developing some awareness about what health even means to you and why you feel the need to improve it. And I just want to say this about that it's not, if you say in your head right now, well, I want to get healthier because I want to lose the weight, because I want to look better in a dress, because I want to look good for bikini season, I guarantee that is actually not the driving force. There is something underneath that you need to get really clear on. Why do you want to look better in a dress? Why do you want to lose weight? Why do you want to wear a small in clothing size? What does that lead to? There's definitely something that you want to feel underneath that. And I would encourage you to get really curious about what the heck that is. The other thing I want to say about awareness, self-awareness, is there's a big difference between an outcome goal and an identity goal. And James Clear, if anyone has read Atomic Habits, which I highly recommend, he does a beautiful job at explaining this in his book. And, an outcome goal is kind of a short-lived goal along the way, where an identity goal is really about who you're becoming in the process of change. And so the difference is that and these are some of his examples, the first couple are some of his examples. The goal is not necessarily to read a book. The goal is to become a reader. Because if you're a reader, you're going to read lots of books. Another example is the goal is to not run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. Because likely, if you're an avid runner, chances are you're probably going to run a marathon somewhere down the line. And I would go on to say this specifically around health. These are not his examples, these are mine. The goal is not to exercise. The goal is to become maybe an active woman, right? So the goal is not to exercise. The goal is to become an active woman. Because guess what? If you're an active woman, you're probably going to exercise. The goal is not to lose weight. The goal is to become someone who honors the needs of her mind, body, and soul. And I would venture to guess that if you were someone who consistently honored the need of your mind, body, and soul, there's a high likelihood that if you're carrying extra weight, that weight loss may be a byproduct of that. But I love the difference between outcome goals versus identity goals. And I hope you hear the difference in that. Another layer of self-awareness that I talk a lot about with my clients is, where are you starting exactly? If you are not willing to get to know yourself, right? I have a lot of women that say to me, I know how I eat. I eat well. Okay, well, let's actually track some of that behavior and see what you're actually doing. Same thing with exercise. I hear when people say all the time, I exercise 3 days a week, 5 days a week, nothing's changing. Okay, what are you doing exactly? And when you start to collect some data, you stop making assumptions. And holy cow, there's a lot of information gets lost when we start making assumptions. And I see this all the time when clients start collecting data. What they're really doing is quite different from what they think they're doing. So being willing to collect some data, because once you collect some data about your behavior, how much are you sleeping? How much water are you drinking? Once you start collecting that kind of data, it's really easy to start to see where some of the gaps are. And when you can start to see where gaps are, it's really easy to start making some decisions about where you maybe need to develop better habits. And so that moves us into this conversation of self-development. So once you've developed a little bit of self-respect, which we talked about last week, the importance of self-respect along the health journey, once you develop a little bit of self-respect, you are more willing to become self-aware. And once you become more self-aware, you get the choice to lean in to self-development if you so choose. So what is self-development? Self-development, again, Wikipedia to the rescue here, is the process by which a person's character or abilities are gradually developed. And it's amazing how much we see the need for this in children, right? It's why we send them to school. It's why we parent them. We talk all about child development and all the ways in which we can, raise our children into competent adults. And then somewhere along the line, we kind of start making these assumptions about ourselves that development is no longer necessary. Like, we've arrived. And holy cow, is that a mistake, right? I think it's a mistake to the depth at which we could live our lives. So this is speaking directly to, why is self-development important? Well, I believe it's important because we're here to evolve. We're here to become our best selves, to be the best expression of ourselves possible. And if we feel like hell all the time, man, that's hard to do. Self-development is imperative for personal growth, to live richer and more fulfilling lives. We must be willing to develop ourselves. And personally, what I love about self-development is there's no end to it. You are never just going to arrive one day into your fully developed self. Man, do we wish that was true, right? But that's not how it works. Self-development is an ongoing journey. And we can get really deflated and pissed off about that, or we can look at that as a really awesome thing. Isn't it so cool that we will have a chance to continue to develop ourselves for the rest of our lives? Well, so why do we struggle with it? Why do we have such a challenge with personal development? Well, first and foremost, the ego, right? Because we don't like thinking that we need improvement. And I'm not saying you're broken. Please don't hear me saying that. I don't believe that everyone should lean into personal development because they're broken people. I don't believe that at all. I believe that if we just want to live our most expressed life, we need to be willing to develop the parts of our lives that would make that possible. And oftentimes, the ego is telling us that, we're perfectly fine the way we are, right? This is just the way I am. The ego loves to get in the way of personal development. I also think we don't love the idea of work, right? We kind of like to live the best life with the minimal amount of effort. But the reality is, to develop any skill, to become more proficient in any area of your life, of course there's work involved. And if we struggle with discipline or consistency or effort, right, we tell ourselves stories about those things, well, self-development is going to be very difficult for us. So how do we lean into self-development? How do we make it easier? Well, I think we need to have very compelling reasons for wanting to develop certain parts of ourselves. And going back to what I brought up earlier in this episode, I think when women chase diets and exercise programs purely for weight loss or appearance purposes, eventually that falls flat. Eventually, that is no longer going to motivate the person. So compelling reasons to me go much deeper than aesthetics. In order to develop yourself, you must be willing to be a beginner and face your weaknesses and recognize that you're gonna suck, right? When we start practicing things that might be new for us in tribute to developing a skill that we want to have, we've got to let go of this notion that we're supposed to be awesome at it at the beginning. I have to tell you, I some of you know, I'm in Brooke Castillo's certification course. And we just started classes last week. And it's so funny because, well, it is funny and it's also frustrating that the way that we're learning to coach is so radically different from what I've done in the past. And I really kind of suck at it. And it's kind of awesome because it's exactly why I signed up for the program. Is because I want to develop into an even better coach. And so I'm allowing myself to be in a space where I really suck at something. And I know that it's going to lead to such a great thing down the road. But if I just get caught up in the suck, I would quit, right? I would tell myself stories. I wouldn't show up to do the work. I would come up with lots of reasons of why I can't show up for myself in this. And so I have to catch myself and I just have to keep reminding myself, Courtney, it's okay to suck. I think we also struggle to develop ourselves because we often don't choose pathways to developing ourselves in ways that we can actually sustain. Right? So we sign up for the crazy exercise program, like intense boot camp, for 6 weeks, or like radically reducing our calories or cutting out entire food groups. But can you sustain that? Is that even working for you? Is it going to work for you 6 months to 6 years from now? If not, I think you need to seriously reconsider the pathway that you're choosing. I also think that we can make self-development so much easier for ourselves when we're willing to ask for help and guidance. Because sometimes somebody outside of our life, right? Somebody with an outside perspective can see gaps where we don't see them. Or they can offer perspective on how to fill the gaps when we can't see those solutions right in front of us. So I do believe that even though I'm such an advocate of women being self-led and self-directed in their health journey, of course, I think that it's very helpful to have people guide you along the way, to show you things that you may not have seen before. But you're not handing over your power in those situations. You still need to be questioning. You still need to be asking, ultimately, is this working for me? Is this something I see myself doing 6 months to 6 years from now? That's all I'm going to say today about self-awareness and self-development. I hope I gave you some things to chew on. Next week, we are going to talk about self-management. Why self-management is such an important part of self-leadership, and especially in the health equation. We have to learn how to manage our time to take care of ourselves. We have to learn how to manage our energy in order to show up for ourselves. We need to learn how to manage our mind so we stop rationalizing, negotiating, and compromising our way out of our own self-care. So self-management is a very powerful next step Once you have started working on a little self-respect, you've started to become more self-aware, you've started to focus a little bit on self-development. And self-development is really identifying the areas that we want to improve. And there's no way you're going to improve those areas if you don't have time or energy to improve those areas, which is what self-management is all about. So I hope you will join me next week for that conversation. And once again, if you're loving this material, if you're really like having a lot of aha moments that, oh, this is kind of a different way of looking at improving health, please book a free Kickstart call with me if you're considering the signature program. Again, you can go to graceandgrit.com/Kickstart. You can read about details of the program there, and you can get on my schedule for one of those calls. The program starts on May 6th. So don't delay because there's a few weeks left. But before you go today, I did a short little interview with a client of mine to give you a better sense of the value of working with me. Because I think there's a lot of different types of health coaching out there these days. And so I wanted to provide an experience of you listening to a client of mine so you could get a better sense of how the clients feel about the work and how they describe the work from the client perspective. And like I said, I'll be doing these interviews for the next several weeks, and I'll always play them at the end of the episodes. So if you enjoy what you hear and you want to hear more, definitely look for that in the coming weeks at the tail end of the episodes. All right, that's it, my friends. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you take some time out to chew on this material and really start asking yourself some questions to show yourself a little respect and to become a little bit more self-aware, and definitely to start to develop yourself, because that's the name of the game, is being willing to step into that self-leadership role to take radical responsibility for your health, your happiness, and ultimately for your life. All right, have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. All right. So at the end of this podcast today, I wanted to bring in a client of mine, and I'm going to do this over the next couple of weeks. And the reason that I'm doing this is because the conversation we're having this month on the podcast is, of course, self-leadership. And self-leadership, as I have said many, many times, is really kind of the bedrock of the work that I do as a health coach. So I definitely educate my clients about food and exercise and the importance of restoration and the importance of mindfulness, all of these things. But at the end of the day, everything that I am teaching is in tribute to helping my clients become more self-directed in their own health journey. So they feel like they can really come back to themselves and reintroduce that level of trust with themselves. So they don't feel like they're always having to, take programs and seek advice from outside people on how to live their best life, that they have that within themselves. And I teach them kind of how to tap into that. So my guest today, Heather White, has been a client. Gosh, Heather, I don't know, how long has it been? Like has it been over 6 months, 7 months?
Definitely. I think in July will be a year.
Okay. So in July it'll be a year. So, okay. So we're almost, we'll be at a year in July. That's good to know. And Heather lives in Amsterdam, which she is an American. She lives in Amsterdam. And she is also a trainer who is ultimately, I hope, going to become a coach as well, especially after the work she's done in this program. But I always think it's important to kind of tell the audience that, about 30% of my clientele is coaches and trainers. And the reason I think that's important to drive home is because so many of us look at people in the field of coaching and training and we think that they have their shit together, right? We think that they have it all figured out and they don't struggle with their health at all. And that is not the case. I mean, the way I got into health coaching was because I was literally the broken personal trainer. And I work with so many people who kind of get into that space of just feeling like something's off. Something is out of alignment. And so they seek out help to get themselves realigned. And Heather definitely is a kind of a testament to that. So Heather, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for taking time to come on here and talk to the audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Exciting since I listen to the podcast all the time.
Yeah, right? So will you kind of just share a little bit about where you were when you sought me out as a health coach and why you even signed up to work with me in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say my first and foremost reason for seeking out a health coach was to get a handle on nutrition. I had done sort of a lot of extreme things. And as a trainer, as someone in the field, I felt very not knowledgeable about nutrition and what I should be putting in my body. And especially when clients would ask for my advice, I didn't feel like I should be giving them any advice because I only had extreme examples to share. I also felt there were a few things about my body, missing menstrual cycles and poor sleep that probably could have been answered with just a bit of nutrition advice. And I also have a friend, Babette, who's been on the podcast before. And I just texted her one day and said, hey, does somebody help you with food? And she said, yeah, Courtney. And I said, okay, now I'm in. Now I'm definitely sending a message. So yeah, that's how that started.
I love it. So I want to ask, like before we started working together and you were kind of, working through your own health stuff and gleaning on to sort of new ideas. And did you ever feel like you were just in a space of overwhelm because there's so much information out there about what we should be doing to be in a state of great health?
My favorite phrase about that is paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
I was dumping so much information into my brain. And for the first year that I was doing that, it was enlightening and fascinating. And I felt really like, wow, I got it under control. I know exactly what to do. And then fast forward 3 or 4 years and you're thinking, wow, I've tried everything that they're telling me and nothing is working. What is the issue here? And feeling like you're constantly guessing and checking over your own health, trial and error, guess and check. That's not a fun method. That's not sustainable. And that's really, frustrating after a while.
Yeah. I always call that the throwing the spaghetti at the wall approach, right? That we kind of throw the spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. And I think the challenge with that kind of approach is that we don't really do anything consistently for very long. So we're constantly like switching from one idea to the next, removing certain food groups and then removing a different food group. And we don't really even give ourselves long enough to experience any kind of change, which I think can lead to a lot of frustration.
No, I honestly wish I had found you years ago because it would have saved me from sifting through an enormous amount of information and picking out parts that I thought were serving me, which ended up to really not serve me. And here I was just thinking, wow, I'm trying so hard. I'm really trying my best, but there's sometimes just too much information out there. And if you don't know how to apply it, it can be, dangerous, really not helpful.
Yeah, I think that's such a good note. And I know so many women listening can resonate with that feeling that I'm doing so much work and I'm trying so hard and it's not working.
Yeah, and nothing is worse than that. Then you just want to completely give up.
Exactly. So what do you think after 7-8 months of coaching, what do you think your biggest wins have been?
I think, and this is kind of a recent realization, but I think I'm getting close to eliminating my all or nothing mentality. And
that's great news.
That's huge. I mean, I'm not even sure I knew that's what I was doing before, was having this all or nothing mentality. But as I feel myself making different decisions and treating myself in a different way, I feel like, wow, maybe I'm finally getting out of that pattern. That's definitely one huge win. As far as an emotional or mental win. A physical win would definitely be getting my regular menstrual cycle back and understanding what to put into my body to feel good. Again, not having to guess and check or experience trial and error, but really feeling and seeing these results from putting things in my body that nourish me and that help me.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember when we first started working together, I think you would come home in the afternoon for lunch and just feel like you had to take like a 2 to 3 hour nap because you were so exhausted all the time.
3-hour naps were definitely a thing. And it was my partner that was like, I don't know if that's okay. And I was like, this is what I do all the time. And he was like, I'm just not sure that's helpful. I'm just not sure that's normal. Okay.
And you're still an advocate of naps. It's just that you don't feel the need for such a long nap.
20 minutes is okay these days. So that's great.
I love it. Awesome. Yeah, those are great wins. And I think a lot of people, again, are going to be able to identify with that. So for a woman listening who may not understand the value of working with a health coach, what would you say to her? Because, I feel like health coaching has become, of course, now a buzzword. Like everybody is a health coach.
Definitely, yeah.
And there are so many different types of health coaches out there. I honestly hate even using the word health coach to describe my work, but for lack of a better word, because it's a phrase that a lot of people know. How would you explain health coaching to, at least this level of health coaching, to someone, and how would you explain the value of it?
What I experience, and I find it to be very supportive in the entire journey, is feeling like someone is always in my corner. Someone's always checking in with me. Hey, how are you? How's that working for you? What do you feel like today? And just having someone ask you those questions and hold you accountable for the answers is incredibly powerful. And you always finish the call or finish the session thinking, I have support. I really have someone who wants to help me be my best. And sometimes you don't want to help yourself be your best. And it feels good to know that there's someone in your corner. There's someone rooting for you no matter what, no matter your mood, no matter how you feel. There's still someone out there who's going to hold you accountable, who's going to keep you on the right path. And I think that's extremely valuable. You also, from your health coach or from you, I received such valuable feedback and unique perspective on myself and my behaviors and the way that I interpret situations. And maybe you should start to call yourself like health coach / psychologist / I don't know, a lot of different other things.
Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't expect when they come to work like this, maybe people do because they've been listening to my podcast, but I do think that there's a lot of people who come into work like this that don't necessarily expect that there's going to be so much inner work, that it really is. Like my whole purpose as a health coach is you reintroducing yourself to you getting to know yourself on a very intimate level, so you can make very conscious choices about what the next right step is for your life.
Yeah, I would definitely say I'm feeling much more emotionally independent when it comes to making decisions for myself. And that's powerful.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely is. So I always love it when people talk about their biggest challenges in the process, because as I say, I really am such a big believer that success is created by stacking failures, right? We all have challenges. Like anytime you put yourself in the arena of personal growth, you're going to have challenges. And I know there's been challenges along this journey for you. Would you be willing to maybe share a couple of those with the audience?
Definitely. I would say my biggest challenge, and maybe it still is just very simple, and that's taking responsibility for my own actions. It sounds so simple.
Yeah.
But when I know that I have to speak with you, or I know that I intentionally didn't food journal because I didn't want to write something down, and it's just really looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I did that and now I'm going to deal with it, as opposed to, you can really always skirt around the issue in your own brain. You can always justify and squirm your way out of it or make it make sense. But with you, it's just really straightforward, honest, and there's no way to avoid it. Like actions are actions. And having someone just kind of present them in a black and white manner and taking responsibility for them is very difficult and also helpful at the same time.
Yeah, because really, unless we take radical responsibility, we aren't really making any kind of meaningful change. And I think the secret to being able to take radical responsibility is learning how to stop judging everything, right? Like, because women are stuck in a pattern of every time they see that they've slipped up or done something that was misaligned with what they really want, they go down this rabbit hole of self-judgment, which only makes everything 10 times worse.
Right. Right. And with all that information out there of getting so overwhelmed, you feel like, well, I read that article and I followed those steps. And so it doesn't matter what the result was. I did it right. You know, I did my best. And then having someone take a closer look and say, hey, but actually that didn't serve you. Then you have to think like, wow, okay, I'm the one that's making a mistake. And now I need to fix it. And then just being fine with it instead of, bashing on yourself or trying to prevent those consequences from coming by pretending you didn't do that in a way.
Definitely. So I will tell those of you listening that Heather and I met sort of via similar, just people we have in common in our life. But we have this mutual connection of being students of Ido Portal. And something that I always think about in my own health journey is I think about like when in our programming, when we were first learning handstands, right? Or we were learning some kind of complex movement pattern. You will never become a better mover if you are not willing to screw up a lot. Like think of how many failed pull-ups you did, how many failed handstands, how many failed muscle ups, like whatever movement we want to talk about, we did that 10 times more wrong than we ever did it right.
Absolutely.
And that's how we got stronger and how we became more capable. And I think that if women in general could just start seeing failure as not a stop sign telling them that that they can't continue and that they shouldn't continue, but rather kind of as a beacon that, oh, you're failing, you must be doing work that matters.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah. So anything else you want to share about your experience?
So many things. Yeah. If I could just, I mean, when I just recently was home and surrounded by a lot of women in my family, and I wanted to just send them all to you. And just me saying, hey, I have this health coach. Immediately you saw their face like, oh, here she is again with this health stuff. And like you say, health coach it's not the right word. It's not the right description. But I mean, I guess we'll stick with it for now and just hope that we can get people to hear that it's so much more than just health and so much more than coaching. It's like you said, becoming your own guide and becoming independent and making your own wise decisions and not having to rely on others to tell you what to do. And I think that's the best, most empowering part of having a health coach.
I love it. I love what you said there, that it's about becoming your own guide. Like it is. Absolutely. Like life is a journey. And if we're not willing to sort of be the director of our own journey, that's where things become really problematic. And absolutely, coaches and teachers and programs can be so instrumental in helping us to get to know ourselves better. But at the end of the day, we need to be working with people who really have that same goal of making us responsible for our own life. And I know Absolutely. I've had many experiences of working with people who never wanted to give me that freedom. They always wanted me to rely on them. And that for me eventually just felt like an itchy sweater. Like I just wanted to get it off.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great description.
Yeah. So, well, I have to say that you've been a total pleasure to work with. It's been so exciting to see all of the sort of epiphanies you've had and just the growth that you've had over our time working together. We're certainly not done. But yeah, I appreciate you being a client, and I definitely appreciate you coming on here and being willing to share your experience with listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very happy. And yeah, thanks for always being in my corner.
Definitely. My absolute pleasure. All right, Heather, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Bye, Courtney.
Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story. And it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort. And with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.